Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Matt Gaetz decided to withdraw from President Trump considering him as Attorney General, but Musk and Ramaswamy published their plans to save Americans with cut regulations, a smaller federal government, and less waste. Okay, let's get into it. On Thursday, Matt Gaetz decided to withdraw from President Trump considering him for Attorney General because he's concerned that his confirmation would unfairly deflect attention from the administration's critical work. Matt Gaetz said in a post on X, "There's no time to waste on a needless protracted Washington scuffle, thus I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Trump's DOJ must be in place and ready on day one. I remain fully committed to see that Donald J. Trump is the most successful president in history." President Trump responded to Gaetz' announcement. He acknowledged his reason, appreciated his efforts, and believes Matt Gaetz has a wonderful future ahead. President-elect Trump wrote on Truth Social, "I greatly appreciate recent efforts of Matt Gaetz in seeking approval to be Attorney General. He was doing very well, but at the same time did not want to be a distraction from the administration for which he has much respect. Matt has a wonderful future, and I look forward to watching all of the great things he will do." The House Ethics Committee met on Wednesday to discuss whether to release an investigative report on former Representative Matt Gaetz. Although the House Ethics Committee was under tremendous pressure to release the report, the committee ultimately decided not to cave, and they refused to release the report. Following Wednesday's meeting, Michael Guest, the chairman of the House Committee on Ethics, told reporters there was not an agreement by the committee to release the report. Many members were reluctant to disclose details to the media. Other members said that the report was still incomplete and that they planned to finalize it and meet again in December. Despite bipartisan calls for the release of the report, House Speaker Mike Johnson is adamant about the secrecy of the report. Michael Guest said that the committee's decision had nothing to do with the opinions of any individuals. He said, "I appreciate Mike reaching out. I don't see it having an impact on what we as a committee ultimately decide." As the ethics panel convened, Gaetz was meeting with senators on the other side of the Capitol to solicit support. For about 4 hours, J.D. Vance arranged for Gaetz to meet with various senators. The South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham said that he had a very good meeting with Gaetz and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, and he doesn't want Gaetz' nomination turning into an angry mob with unverified allegations being treated as if they are true. Graham said, "I would urge all of my Senate colleagues, particularly Republicans, not to join the lynch mob and give the process a chance to move forward." Senator Josh Hawley, a Missouri Republican, also said that the Gaetz-Vance meetings went well, and he questioned whether Gaetz would face allegations and questions in a forum that is reasonable. Brianna Garcia, Gaetz' ex-girlfriend who provided crucial testimony in the Matt Gaetz sex trafficking investigation, praises Gaetz, suggesting that he would serve effectively as Attorney General. She told DailyMail.com, "He'll be great for the country. Matt's very smart." Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal on Wednesday stating that DOGE will be reforming government in 3 directions: streamlining regulations, downsizing federal manpower, and cutting spending. They wrote, "The entrenched and ever-growing bureaucracy represents an existential threat to our republic, and politicians have abetted it for too long." The DOGE team will work with legal experts within the government, and they will also be aided by advanced technology in order to identify administrative regulations that go beyond what Congress has authorized. And they will hand over a list of those regulations to President Trump. President Trump could, through executive action, immediately suspend these statutes and initiate the review and repeal process. They intend to find the minimum number of employees that an agency needs in order to carry out its legal and constitutional duties. But first, it's necessary to reduce the number of unneeded regulations. By streamlining the statutes, not only will less manpower be needed to enforce the law, but it will also be unnecessary to spend extra manpower on enacting more statutes once the authority of the organizations is suitably limited. They also said the number of federal employees to cut should be at least proportionate to the number of federal regulations that are nullified. But they emphasize that federal employees whose jobs are being cut should be treated with respect, and that DOGE's goal is to help them transition to the private sector or to reward them with early retirement. It is generally recognized that the U.S. President and administrative officers are prohibited by law from dismissing civil servants. However, they believe that the statute protects civil servants from political retaliation. However, the statute also allows the president to order a reduction in the size of the workforce if it does not target a specific individual. Past presidents have used executive orders to make such decisions, and there is also Supreme Court precedent. The method of decimating employees by getting them back into the office, which we talked about in previous shows, will also be used. The article from Musk and Ramaswamy also says, if federal employees don't want to show up, American taxpayers shouldn't pay them for the COVID-era privilege of staying home. They also intend to target funds that have not been reauthorized by Congress, which amounts to about $500 billion. This includes $535 million for the public broadcasting system, $1.5 billion in grants to international organizations, and $300 million in spending for progressive groups. They didn't say in the article that they would eliminate those agencies, but Elon Musk shared an interview with Milton Friedman, a famous economist on X. Musk wrote, Milton Friedman was the best. Here are Milton Friedman's suggestions.
14 is a lot for television, so I want to just go right down the list quickly and have you give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Keep them or abolish them. Department of Agriculture.
Abolish.
Gone. Department of Commerce.
Abolish.
Gone. Department of Defense.
Keep.
Keep it. Department of Education.
Abolish.
Gone. Energy.
Abolish.
Housing.
Except that energy ties in with the military.
Well, then we shove it under defense.
That's
the little
right.
bit that handles the nuclear,
Right, that ought to go under
plutonium
defense.
and so forth goes under defense, but we abolish the rest of it.
But with the HHS, he believes that the situation is more complex and cannot be simply concluded.
Health and Human Services?
There is room for some public health activities to prevent contagion. Such a thing as, for example,
So you'd keep the National Institutes of Health, say, and the Center for Disease Control down in
not the
Atlanta?
National Institute.
No?
Those are mostly a research agency. No. That's a question of whether the government should be involved in financing research.
And the answer is no.
Well, that's a very complicated issue, and it's not an easy answer with respect to that.
We'll eliminate half of the Department of Health and Human
something
Services?
like that.
Okay, one half. There we go.
At a lot of other departments, it's much easier.
Housing and Urban Development?
Out.
Oh. Department of the Interior, your beloved National Park Service.
Well, given the problem there is, you first have to sell off all the land that the government owns. But that's what you should do.
But it could be done pretty quickly.
It could be done. You should do that. There's no reason for the government to own. The government now owns something like 1/3 of all the land in the country.
And that's too much. Should go down to zero.
Should go down to, well, not entirely zero. They ought to own the land on which government buildings are.
Okay, terrific. Department of Justice.
Oh, yes.
Keep that one.
Keep that one.
Labor.
No.
Gone. State.
Keep.
Keep it. Transportation.
Gone.
Gone. The Treasury.
You have to keep it to collect taxes.
All right, collect taxes through the Treasury. Veterans Affairs.
You can regard the Veteran Affairs as a way of paying essentially salaries for services of those who have been in the armed force, but you ought to be able to get rid of it.
You should be able to pay it off.
Pay it off.
Pay off lump sums, perhaps.
That's right.
And just get rid of it.
And we'll talk more about Milton Friedman's economic theories in the future. We mentioned yesterday that Speaker Johnson drew a line in the sand on the bathroom fight in Congress. Johnson said in a statement, all single-sex facilities in the Capitol and House office buildings, such as restrooms, change rooms, and locker rooms, are reserved for individuals of that biological sex. It is important to note that each member office has its own private restroom, and unisex restrooms are available throughout the Capitol. Women deserve women's-only spaces. He further told reporters that this was not a new policy but an agreed-upon practice. He said, "We're not anti-anyone. We're pro-women, and I think it's an important policy for us to continue. It's always been the I guess an unwritten policy, but now it's in writing. After being attacked for proposing to ban transgender people from using women's restrooms, Representative Nancy Mace introduced another new bill that would ban biological men from using women's private protected facilities such as bathrooms and locker rooms on all federal property across the country. Mace's office added, the vast majority of Americans recognize the importance of protecting women's rights and privacy while the woke mob manufactures outrage. Transgender Representative McBride responded that he would comply with the Speaker's decision. He said, I'm not here to fight about bathrooms. Like all members, I will follow the rules as outlined by Speaker Johnson, even if I disagree with them. President Trump appointed Linda McMahon as Secretary of Education. The public is familiar with Linda McMahon as a successful businesswoman. She has successfully grown World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, from a 13-person local Connecticut company to a publicly traded global corporation with offices around the world and more than 800 employees. Now, all eyes are on whether Linda McMahon will be the very Secretary of Education who helps President Trump dismantle the Department of Education. Let's take a look at how McMahon moved from business to politics and how she connected with President Trump. Linda McMahon was introduced to the professional wrestling industry because her father-in-law was a prominent professional wrestling promoter. Linda McMahon and her husband, Vince McMahon, started their own company, WWE, in 1980. They made wrestling entertainment an important part of the American industry and American culture. WWE's explosive growth and the way it changed the way the wrestling industry operates has led some observers to dub the Linda and Vince couple as business geniuses. McMahon's passion for politics began in the year 2000. At the time, she initiated WWE's nonpartisan voter registration campaign, which targeted voters between the ages of 18 and 30. Linda McMahon resigned as WWE CEO in 2009 and left the company while moving into politics. She ran unsuccessfully for a U.S. Senate seat in Connecticut in 2010 and 2012. In both campaigns, she won the Republican nomination, but she lost in the finals to Democratic candidates Richard Blumenthal in 2010 and Chris Murphy in 2012. Both Democrats are still serving in the Senate. After her two unsuccessful campaigns, Linda McMahon shifted gears and began to focus on financial support for Republican candidates, and she became a major fundraiser and contributor to the Republican Party. But the couple's involvement with President Trump dates back to 2007. At the time, President Trump was a superstar on the reality TV show The Apprentice. The McMahons invited then Donald Trump to appear at WrestleMania. They also orchestrated a public entertainment by having Donald Trump shave Vince McMahon's head in the center of the wrestling ring. 1 month after his victory in 2016, President Trump nominated Linda McMahon to lead the Small Business Administration. The agency's primary responsibility is to provide loans and disaster relief assistance to small companies and businesses and to oversee government officials' compliance with contract law. President Trump called Linda McMahon a superstar, and he praised her for doing a better-than-expected job as director of the Small Business Administration. McMahon left the Trump administration in 2019 in order to focus on helping President Trump's 2020 re-election campaign. She chaired the Super PAC, America First Action, which raised $83 million for President Trump's 2020 re-election campaign. After President Trump's 2020 election, McMahon co-founded and chaired the board of directors of the America First Policy Institute. The principles of the Institute are to continue to advocate for President Trump's agenda and to prepare for his return to the White House. When President Trump ran for president for a third time this year, McMahon's role was known to all of us. She and Howard Lutnick served as co-chairs of President Trump's transition team. Once in office as Secretary of Education, McMahon's biggest task may be to dismantle and abolish this federal agency that she will be leading. The Department of Education was created by Congress in 1979, and its elimination will likely have to be approved by Congress. But before it is dissolved and formally abolished, it's expected that President Trump can gradually paralyze the Department of Education through executive orders and budget revocations. President Trump will take office early next year. Ambassadors in Washington are trying to meet with potential members of the new Trump administration, but Beijing is at a particular disadvantage. The Financial Times reported that Chinese Communist Party officials were traveling between Washington and New York in hopes of finding contacts with President Trump, but they had been unable to secure appointments with potential Trump administration officials. The Chinese ambassador to the United States, Xi Feng, has hosted dozens of former U.S. officials and China experts at his home in Washington, D.C. in recent months. Evan Medeiros, a former senior White House official on Asian affairs, was among those he hosted. He told the Financial Times that President Trump's victory caught the Chinese Communist Party by surprise. The central question that Beijing wants to know is, what does Trump want? Medeiros said that CCP officials were asking Democratic analysts how to deal with the Trump team. This sounds ridiculous. Shouldn't they be consulting with Republican analysts? But the problem is that Republicans have been reluctant to reach out to CCP officials. Former House Foreign Affairs Committee and Senate Foreign Affairs Committee staffer Ann Kowalewski said that many in Congress are reluctant to meet with CCP officials because they don't think the meeting will be constructive. It'll just be Chinese Communist Embassy officials reading talking points to them. A source in Beijing with connections to the CCP said Beijing would like to reach a deal with President Trump if possible, but the challenge is that they don't know what President Trump's goals are or who can bring the two sides together. Ye Yao Yun, a St. Thomas University professor of international studies, told the Epoch Times that the CCP, when observing U.S. diplomacy, has always believed that President Trump is a trade-based negotiator. Beijing believes that anything can be traded as long as it's beneficial to both sides. In the past, the CCP has used this approach to maneuver around the U.S. and influence U.S. policy. But what the Chinese Communist Party does not understand is that in the United States, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, there exists a core value. Ye commented by saying, for example, Trump is elected president. What is most important to him is not to increase his personal wealth or personal interests, but for the well-being of his country. His core national interest is to maintain American hegemony, so the CCP's mindset is fundamentally wrong. It's unlikely that Trump will sacrifice U.S. interests for his personal interests or for his relationship with someone. He believes that this is the reason why CCP officials are now unable to have any dialogue mechanism with the Trump team. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember that every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, we thank you, but please double check to make sure that you're still subscribed, because some of our audience have reported that they're somehow unsubscribed without their knowledge. We've also heard that some of you don't get notifications of our videos anymore on YouTube. So when you do subscribe on YouTube, please make sure to tap the notification bell as well. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.